think we're finally to the end of this process. I've done a full mix of the song that I'm pretty happy with. I'm sure this is one of those sessions that I'll pull up from time to time over the next few years and just try new things and experiment, because how I'm doing stuff in this point in time might change completely in a month or a year. We'll see. Kind of got a list here. I want to make sure I kind of stay on track and don't talk too much, because this could turn into an hour of me talking. I don't think anyone wants that at this point. We want to hear what things sound like and get this done. So let's start out and look through the mix real quick. Just go over the overall session real quick. Overall, I think the first thing I'll say is that this mix was pretty easy and straightforward. It took me 2 days to do, which is a long time for me. Generally, I'm getting most of the mixes, especially easier songs like this, done pretty easily in a day. I'll probably stop at some point and just come back to it the next day with some fresh ears and make some tweaks. I think the only reason it took me 2 days to do this song is because I messed around so much and tried so many different things, just out of curiosity and to get it out of my system. But I think, I've hammered in from the beginning, the mindset of our pre-production and how we really thought things through as we went. We figured out exactly where everything needed to go. We got all the heavy lifting done on this song, like way before we got to the mix stage. And so when it got to this point, the tough stuff was done, It made a lot of sense. Everything was laid out. EQ, compress, get it done. You'll look at this session. It looks like there's a lot of things going, and there are some weird, complicated things that I did that I'll go over. But for the most part, this was a pretty straightforward mix. And so, again, that mindset of thinking about Atmos differently, pre-production, really thinking things through a little bit more than you might in stereo necessarily. Got all the heavy lifting done. The mix was very straightforward. Let's see. The first thing that we probably need to go over is at the end of this session, I have this routing folder. So let's open that sucker up and take a look. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'm going to get to, there's an object bed in here. We'll get to that in a second. But the first thing I wanted to show you is how I'm handling my headphones, because I'm obviously mixing on speakers. The speakers sound amazing. It is a cool experience. Most people are not going to hear this on speakers. They're going to hear it on headphones. And so I'll show you how I'm setting up my headphone things, because I've seen how a lot of other people do it, and I think they make it more complicated than they need to. I haven't figured out how to do this, but AudioMovers makes a binaural render plugin that makes all of this pretty easy once you get over the hurdle of figuring out how to set it up and everything, because it is a little complicated. So aside from the routing folder, I also have a headphone folder. You'll see, if it'll open up correctly, I'm doing some real-time alternate renders of the mix. Man, a couple of years ago, this would have been impossible to set it up like this in Pro Tools without a huge hassle. But now that you can do those live re-renders, let me show you. I've got the binaural render plugin set up in the background. So there are a couple of different ways to set up the AudioMovers binaural render thing. You can set it up as a plugin in Pro Tools, but the reason that I have it set up rendering to the external program that they have is because most of my binaural checks as I'm going through are on my Apple, what are these, the Pro models. Now I'll just keep these on for a second. All right, everything's connected. It's set up AirPods Max. Now, if we look here, when I press play, there's a couple of things going on in real time. I've got a render called the Apple Binaural Render, which is a 7.1.4 re-render that is going to this, and you see that it's sending correctly to it. I also have two other re-renders. I have the regular Dolby binaural render because, and a lot of you probably know this, but there's two different main headphone mixes that consumers can hear at this point. You can, if you're using Apple Spatial and Apple Music, Apple has their own binaural render that sounds different from the Dolby render. So that's another mix check you have to do. So I've basically, with the way that the AudioMovers plugin is set up, I can have it set up to where when I put these on, in real time, I can listen to the Apple Spatial render. I can go over to the Dolby binaural render because in my preset, I've got that going out to a virtual set of outputs that are going to their program in the background. And then I also just have my regular stereo 2.1 or 2.0 render that I can go between. So at any point, I can throw these headphones on. I can pop up their program that's saying in the background. I can sit here and listen to the Apple Spatial render. I can pop over to the Dolby binaural render. Then I can just listen to the 2.0 render. The other reason I do it on the external program is just I like the layout of doing it that way. Obviously, you can put it in as a plugin in Pro Tools, but I'm choosing to do it this way. For the Apple Spatial render, I also have my personalized HRTF that basically when you buy the AirPods, you can do an HRTF where you head-related transfer function for those of you that don't know what that is. But basically what it's doing is it takes a video and a few pictures of your head and it customizes a bunch of the binaural settings to work for your head better. That's a whole nother thing I don't want to go into. Do some research on it, HRTFs, if you haven't heard of that before. For the Apple Spatial render, it makes a massive difference, and we'll come back to that. But basically, I wanted to show you this this AudioMovers plugin because I think this is one of the best ways to be able to listen to the binaural renders, and I think a lot of people at this stage are probably using the Apple products that are into Atmos on headphones. So these headphones actually sound pretty damn good in my opinion. I think it's a good mix check. I check in other headphones, but this is kind of what I do when I'm mixing. At any point, I can just grab these and pick them up and go between the Apple Spatial render on them, the Dolby binaural render, and the 2.0. And when you throw those on, you can also do head tracking if you do the external program. So pretty cool. So if any of you are trying to think about like ways to be able to listen to Apple Spatial in real time if you're not using Logic, I think that that AudioMovers plugin is just amazing. I would recommend it. And it's under $100. It's like 70 or 80 bucks. It's not too bad. Check that out. All right. What the hell is going on over here? For those of you that have worked in Atmos, you probably know what this is, but this is an object bed. And if you're an Atmos savvy person, you probably noticed on all of the tracks over here that none of these are objects. They're being bused to a 7.1.4 bed. So what I have done is, and this is how I've chosen to work recently, and there are downsides to doing it this way, but there are also upsides that I'll get to in a minute. When this is sent out as an ADM deliverable, what's going to happen is you're going to have 11 objects and one in the sub channel going to the bed. So if we press play and we look at the Dolby render, you basically have objects set up in all the speaker locations, and those are your 11 objects, and then you have the subwoofer, which I treat separately, and everyone should. That's going to the LFE channel on the normal Dolby bed that's set up there. So everything is going to an object bed. Each one of these objects is corresponding to a speaker location and a 7.1.4 speaker setup. There's a lot of reasons why, well, there's a million different ways you can think about Atmos and mix in Atmos. I thought this was cool for a lot of reasons that I don't want to get into because I want this to be fun. I don't want to turn this into an argument because everybody has opinions about this stuff. But the cool thing about this is that it's very easy to do a more traditional mix bus setup, because you'll see that I have a master fader for all of these objects in the object bed so that I can throw some stuff on there. For this video, the main thing I want to focus on why I decided to mix to an object bed is because of the McDSP APB system. This is an analog box that McDSP has made where it has 16 analog channels inside of it, and they are all controlled with plugins, but it is an analog gain stage for the compression. They have VCAs to do the compression analog. The circuits have op amps and stuff in them. They don't have tubes and they don't have transformers, but they are real analog circuits. They've got 6, so every time you use one plugin, if you have the 8-channel one or the 16-channel one, it takes up one channel every time you use one of the plugin things because it's analog. So here I can just show you real quick. So let's pull up one of their, good Lord, can I spell? Let's pull up the chicken head. It's one of my favorites. This is an analog compressor taking up one channel in the APB16 because it has 16 channels. It is an analog compressor that is being controlled via a plugin, and they've done 16 channels of very high quality 32-bit analog AD and DA to bring it all in. Syncs all up. Amazing system. It sounds very good to me as well. So the reason I am mixing to an object bed for this song specifically is because McDSP has this Royal Mew surround compressor. Check this beauty out. Because I'm using a 7.1.4 bed, this takes up 12 channels in the APB16, so it's basically using all of it. But the cool thing about this is that I have analog compression over my Atmos mix bus, and there are some very expensive ways to do this with hardware that are kind of insane, and I know there are some insane mastering engineers doing all analog like Atmos mastering and stuff, but the APBs are not cheap. But considering what they are and what they can do, they break down to like under $500 a channel, which is cheaper than most 500 series units. And you can do stuff like this, like have analog compression over your Atmos mix bus. And if I press play, you'll see everything. There's my left, right, the center channel, sides, rear, top, LFE. You have 2 channels, and don't think about this as stereo. Think about this as 2 different analog channels that you can choose to key different speaker pairs to. So like for channel 1, I have the left, right, center, and sides kind of keying to this first channel compressor. The rears and the tops I've got keying to the second channel, and it's set just a little bit differently. Then you have your key trims at the bottom here to where you can fine tune. So everything's kind of working in tandem to a point where the image doesn't start freaking out and sounding wonky. And if you look, you'll see that the heavy lifting on it's happening to the left and right channels, and the others are just kind of keying off that gradually. I tried doing everything to the same key so it's all compressing all at once, and that sounds weird. Your image starts to collapse and it starts to sound small. If you break things up a little bit and have it all just, it's just kind of tickling the meters. I'm not doing any kind of crazy compression. This is just some analog color and slight compression just to create some movement and, some glue, a lot of people would say. But this thing sounds awesome. I'm going to be completely honest. Most of the time in my videos, I'm not too opinionated, but holy cow. This Royal Mew kicks butt. It really does. All of the downsides of choosing to mix to an object bed, I don't care about them when I throw this thing on and set it. It just sounds so good. Before I got this in, and I'm demoing this right now, I don't know if I'm going to keep this. It's pretty expensive. We'll see. Before I got this in, I had a few different plugin chains on the mix bus that sounded very good to me. Like really did. When I put this on within a few minutes, I was like, man, crap, this sounds so much better. So let me play you a quick segment of the mix with the Royal Mew and without it, just so you can hear what it's doing, because I'm also kind of driving into the analog circuits a little bit to get some color. So there's a lot going on. And, the takeaway is I have analog compression and saturation over my whole Atmos mix bus, and that is pretty cool. So take a listen to that.
The feeling lingers on, flows inside your veins. Death will tempt you with a peaceful light, till all that's left is your remains. Love is patient and it's kind, but it takes effort and it takes time. In a moment you can lose yourself, spend a lifetime in that shame. When I'm feeling guilty, no love can save me. Buried in the shame, I feel it linger. When I'm feeling empty, mountains can't move me. All the failures we live up to.
So it's a subtle difference, but to me it is a big one. And comparing it to some of the plug-in chains I had, it took their lunch money, in my opinion. So very cool option if you want to consider having some analog processing over your whole Atmos mix. Set up an object bed and use something like the APB. It's a pretty cool system. The only other things I had over my mix bus, originally all I was doing was just using the FabFilter EQ just to add a little bit of EQ over everything, just some little tweaks. And then I had the FabFilter limiter just catching like maybe 1 dB peaks here and there. It's a little heavy-handed on the last chorus because there's a lot going on, but I am not slamming this mix. This is just doing some quick little things to catch some peaks. So really not doing much. The one other cool thing I did was about halfway through the mix, I was starting to feel like things just felt a little weak in the low mids, and my high end, I felt like I needed to open it up and make it just a little brighter, but a few things were starting to get just a little harsh. And so I was like, you know what? Let's try the MixWave coil plugin in multiple mono over everything. Just in its stock default setting, I turned the negative feedback all the way down because that kind of brightens things up a little bit and adds a little bit more harmonic distortion. I compensate a little bit on the output because it adds a lot of weight, so I didn't want it making things louder at that point because I had all my gain staging set really well. Just wanted to add some weight to it, so it definitely did that. And after I put that on, I was actually able in FabFilter to boost the high end like 4 dB, which that might seem extreme, but that's the cool thing about the coil stuff, the hardware, and the thing they nailed in the plugin is that if you feel like you need to make something brighter, but you're afraid of it being harsher, put that coil plugin right before it and just set it to where it doesn't really sound like it's doing much. Then boost the high end on an EQ after it. There's going to be a difference, and that's basically what happened here. That coil plugin smoothed off the high end enough to where I was able to boost it and open things up a little bit without it sounding harsh. Then at the very end, I think after I did some mix checks with some other stuff in Atmos that I liked, I just made a few little small tweaks. That's all that's going on the mix bus. I mean, a lot of people don't have mix bus processing. If you're interested in tackling overall mix bus things in Atmos, but you don't want to mix to an object bed or anything, check out some things like the Fiedler Audio's O-Bomb. system. I won't talk about that, but just Google it. It's a cool way they've figured out how to do things to an Atmos mix bus when you want to keep everything object based. So that's another option if you're looking at this and saying, Matt, you're an idiot, you shouldn't do it that way. That's another option. Anyway, I don't want to get into any of that. That Royal Mu compressor is just so cool. I'm happy mixing to an object bed for now, and we'll leave it at that. The other thing I want you to hear some AB audio on is for the Dolby binaural render, you actually have distance settings that you can do. And about a year ago, Pro Tools added it to where it's a lot easier to play around with those distance settings, which was nice because this was a little bit more of a pain to do a few years ago. But you'll see the majority of the time, well, here, in case you don't know about the distance settings, and actually, I should point out, if you've watched this whole video series, all the examples that you were hearing when I had audio examples of the mics were all the Dolby binaural renders, and I had all of those set to near on the distance setting because, okay, I don't want to say anything. Again, I want to keep this positive and just fun, but I prefer keeping the distance settings near on everything almost all the time. So if you look, you'll see that everything on these objects is set to near, except for a few are set to mid. When I was mixing the song originally, all of those objects in the bed were set to near. It sounded pretty good. At the very end, I started playing around with the distance settings on a few of the speaker pairs, and what I found was that I ended up keeping the left, center, right, and sides and near, and then the rear speakers and all the top speakers, I ended up changing those from near to mid, and it made a big difference. Especially if you're doing a lot of stuff with ambisonics, I found that mixing the distance settings on an ambisonic bed, speaker bed, can get funky sometimes and give you some phase problems. For whatever reason, when I changed the rears and tops to mid, sounded much better to me. So I just want to play you an example of the whole mix with everything in near, and then a few ABs of going between everything and near, and then taking those rears and tops to mid so you can hear what that does in the Dolby binaural render.
The feeling lingers on, flows inside your veins. Death will tempt you with a peaceful light, till all that's left is your remains. Love is patient and it's kind, but it takes effort and it takes time. In a moment you can lose yourself, spend a lifetime in that shame. When I'm feeling guilty, no love can save me. Buried in the shame, I feel it linger. When I'm feeling empty, mountains can't move me. All the failures we live up to start to pile up inside your troubled mind.
I think those are the biggest things to kind of tackle in terms of how I mix this. Let's just briefly, I'll kind of go over a few unique things I did in the mix, and then we'll just hear a full song montage. And I'm guessing a lot of you have probably already skipped to that because you're the kind of person that reads the last chapter of a book before you start because you're weird. All right, I know this is long, but, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the journey so far. It's been a long one. All right, vocals. I think the only thing worth mentioning is that I didn't end up using the ambisonic mic that I had rendered just to the rears. I thought at the very least I might try kicking it in the choruses to make the vocal a little bit bigger. But again, it was kind of that thing I talked about where we have all these, things drilled into our head of, we've heard a vocal up front for so long. As soon as I tried adding stuff in the back, it wasn't working for me and things sounded weird. So that was probably the only thing that I recorded that I didn't end up using. For the reverb, I had a master reverb that I sent a few other things to and the vocals, but that was a 7.1 just a 7.4. There's nothing going to the sub, but that was a full kind of immersive reverb using the FabFilter Pro EQ. I don't use this a lot in stereo. I always call it my problem solver EQ. There's times where I'll hear something in my head and I need to recreate it in a very specific way. And there's so many settings on the FabFilter plugin where I'll occasionally pull that up where I have a very specific reverb idea. This thing sounds pretty great when you spread it out and immersively. So this is just a 7.1.4. I've kind of done some settings in the crossfeed section that fed it more towards the rears. So this was kind of just a very subtle thing that I used with the vocal where you don't really know it's there, but as soon as you take it out, it's like, whoa, what happened? So that was kind of my just subtle starting reverb, and I fed a few other things from like the piano, the guitar solo, to actually the only thing that got added to this song that I probably didn't talk about was at the end, I felt like there was something missing from the second chorus or the second verse because things kind of died down a little bit in that. And I sent it to one of my friends, David Stukenberg, amazing musician, one of my best friends. And I sent it to him just to get some feedback. And we both kind of had the same idea at the same time. And he referenced a song that I had already thought about in my head. And I was like, yeah, it needs organ. Why don't you just add some organ? So he added organ. Then he also sent me a Mellotron track where he was like, dude, I know you probably won't like this, but just try it. And I ended up liking it. So there's actually a Mellotron sitting in the background in the rears that I fed to that reverb as well. And I think I fed the snare there as well, just a little bit, just to spread it out because it's a bit of a deader snare. The drums are fairly dead. There's not a ton of room or anything. So I added just a little bit of the snare to the Atmos reverb. The only other thing that I did, and this was just for the vocals, I felt like there needed to be a more traditional kind of upfront stereo thing happening with effects. So I kind of did a thing that I do a lot where I took a tape echo, I spread it out and made it kind of pseudo stereo, and then added a reverb just a little bit to that, about 50%. That's left and right. I ended up spreading that out into the sides and just bringing it out just a little bit for the vocals. See what everything else was very, very straightforward. Let me look through. I mean, again, guys, we nailed this in pre-production. We got everything right. The mix was pretty easy. Drums. Okay, so one of the things that I still kind of struggle with and I spend a lot of time with is figuring out how to do overall bus processing for a drum bus, because in stereo, that's something I lean heavily on. I do a lot of heavy hitting to the drums overall rather than micromanage, especially when I've recorded the drums. Usually the way I record it, I'm not micromanaging individual mics. I'm doing more to it as a whole once I have the mix going. So there's obviously ways you can easily set up mix bus compression for drums and Atmos, but because I had that mono overhead a little bit higher up, and then I had those side mics put in the side speakers, it wasn't as easy as just necessarily doing a stereo mix bus for the drums. So what I did was I ended up just doing a parallel bus where I crushed them a little bit, and I ended up just sending the mono overhead snare and kick to that crush bus to blend in parallel, and I intended to leave that up front in stereo, but ended up pulling that off the front wall just a little bit. And You guys will get a kick out of this. This has been my parallel compression drum bus forever. For like 20 years now. The freaking stock Bomb Factory 1176 just ticking about 1 dB does not sound like an 1176, but it sounds really good. So this has been my drum crush bus on everything for the past 20 years. I get the needle moving on the Bomb Factory BF76, and then I have freaking Renaissance Axe, which is just it's been the MVP over the years. I've used Renaissance Axe on every mix since I started doing stuff in 2004 or something. So I know some of you will get a kick out of that. That is my go-to drum crush. And that's it. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about. We talked about all the important stuff already when we were recording. So, good job, team. High five. All right, so I'm going to shut up. Let's go ahead and listen to a full song montage mix of the song, and let's start out in the Dolby binaural render.
I remember when you took my hand. Love's a funny thing. And I remember when you let it go. That's the feeling that remains. Tried to make it right. And I tried to understand. I was told that all it takes is time. Find a way to let love in. When I'm feeling guilty, no love can save me. Buried in the shame, I feel it linger. When I'm feeling empty, mountains can't move me. All the failures we live up to start to pile up inside your troubled mind. When I'm feeling guilty, inside your veins. Death will tempt you with a peaceful lie, till all that's left is your remains. Love is patient and it's kind, but it takes effort and it takes time. In a moment you can lose yourself, spend a lifetime in that shame. When I'm feeling guilty, no love can save me. Buried in the shame, I feel it linger. When I'm feeling empty, mountains can't move me. All the failures we live up to start to pile up inside your troubled mind. When I'm feeling guilty, feeling guilty, no love can save me. Buried in the shame, I feel it linger. When I'm feeling empty, mountains can't move me. All the failures we live up to start to pile up inside your troubled mind.
Okay, so now I'm going to play you the Apple Spatial Render, and if you want, I thought about doing another one where we went back and forth, but I'll let you guys do that. We'll listen to the Apple Spatial Render that I've rendered from the AudioMovers plugin. I was a little hesitant to do this, but I want to be transparent and thorough, but the thing with the Apple Spatial Render is that in the default setting, now, let me be clear here. There's nothing you can tweak on the Apple Spatial Render. Like, there's no distance settings or anything like you have in the Dolby render. What you send it is what you get. However, there is a big difference between the stock, when you're listening to the stock, versus having the head-related transfer function for your head, the HRTF, and when you have the AirPods, you can just take a picture and video of your head, and Apple does an HRTF based off the measurements on your head. In the stock setting, without any HRTF going, which is what you're going to hear, because the HRTF for my head probably isn't going to work right for what you're going to hear, but to me, the flat Apple Spatial Render just has never sounded great. It sounds too distant. It sounds a little bit more than the mid setting in the Dolby render, which already bugs me a lot of times. But I'm going to play this for you, but I'll just say, if you're listening to stuff on Apple Spatial, use the AirPods or something where it's a really easy way to get an HRTF, because when you plug in and start listening with your custom HRTF on Apple Spatial, stuff stops sounding as reflective and it goes a little bit deader and just sounds better to me. And that's been the case with pretty much everyone I've talked to. So I'm going to play the Apple Spatial Render, but it's going to sound a little reflective and a little too open. And even me, when I'm using the AudioMovers binaural render, when I'm wearing my Apple headphones, I can go back from the static binaural render, you can do the head tracking, but when I'm listening to it statically, you can just do the stock render, which is what you're about to hear, or you can go to your personalized HRTF, which to me, when I go between those, big difference, big difference. So I'll play the Apple Spatial Render just for the hell of it, but it sounds too reflective to me all the time when it's in the stock setting. Listen to things with your custom HRTF is, I guess, the takeaway from all this. So let me play the Apple Spatial Render for you.
I remember when you took my hand. Love's a funny thing. And I remember when you let it go. That's the feeling that remains. Tried to make it right. And I tried to understand. I was told that all it takes is time. Find a way to let love in. When I'm feeling guilty, no love can save me. Buried in the shame, I feel it linger. When I'm feeling empty, mountains can't move me. All the failures we live up to start to pile up inside your troubled mind. When I'm feeling guilty, your veins. Death will tempt you with a peaceful lie, till all that's left is your remains. Love is patient and it's kind, but it takes effort and it takes time. In a moment you can lose yourself, spend a lifetime in that shame. When I'm feeling guilty, no love can save me. Buried in the shame, I feel it linger. When I'm feeling empty, mountains can't move me. All the failures we live up to start to pile up inside your troubled mind. When I'm feeling guilty, no love can save me. Buried in the shame, I feel it linger. When I'm feeling empty, mountains can't move me. All the failures we live up to start to pile up inside your troubled mind.
And that's a wrap. Man, that was a lot of work. This is probably the biggest video project I've ever done. Ton of work. If you watched through all this, thank you. I hope it was long in a good way and not long in an annoying way. I like doing long form stuff like this. And again, I think the biggest thing to get around when we start approaching Atmos in the future is just thinking about it a little differently. Like I've said this over and over again, but just approaching this differently, changing our mindsets. I think when you do it the way that I've shown over this video series, it's a really enjoyable process. It's different. Creatively, it's very fulfilling from an artist standpoint and an engineer standpoint. But, for those of you that actually watch this that might not be into the idea of Atmos, I'm hoping this might tweak a little more interest in you, but I get it. There's a lot of reasons not to do this, but to me personally, I think there's just so many reasons to get into this creatively and just, not on everything, but some projects, do something really cool and really special. So anyway, I'm going to kind of do my Oscar Grammy thing right now and, thank the Academy and everything. First of all, Soyuz, big thank you. Everybody that works at Soyuz, Mark and Scotty, those guys are just amazing. They've had my back so many times and they've been really good to me. So Soyuz, thank you. You guys make great mics. Alejandro at AudioBrewers that does all the ambisonic stuff, that did all the software for the Soyuz ambisonic mic. Alejandro is amazing, and he's been a great source for information and helping me problem solve, and he just makes great plugins. So if you're going to do ambisonics, AudioBrewers all the way. And, one thing I will say about Soyuz mics specifically, I think this was a cool experience because a lot of times if I'm doing a video for a company on a mic review or something, I'm kind of limited to one mic. And those processes and experiences are fun, but a lot of times I always feel a little limited because, why would you ever use one mic for a whole production? There's just, it can be cool, but there's a lot of reasons why that doesn't make sense. But I will say after finishing all this, I'm really happy with how the song sounds, and there wasn't any time where I really felt limited. And I know there's people using Soyuz mics all over the place for all sorts of different genres of music, but for more folky acoustic stuff like this, I think that's the Soyuz sound. All those mics sounded amazing. I never felt limited. Soyuz stuff really kicks ass for this kind of music, and just be very upfront about that. Sounded great. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and those mics just excel in this genre. So if you do stuff like this and you don't own any Soyuz stuff, start with a bomblet. That would be my advice. Bass 4 stands. You saw these funky mic stands that a lot of you have probably never seen before. It's a brand new company called Bass 4, run by a guy named Todd, that's just absolutely amazing. I did a review on those Bass 4 stands, but I use them all through this process, and they've just been great. I've fallen in love with the Bass 4 stands. Use them all the time now, and with me having to throw in a couple of extra mics here and there, it was really easy to use his extension arms and everything to get stuff done really quick and efficiently. So check out Bass 4 stands. GIK, God, there's something flying around now. It's probably my cue to get off the stage. GIK acoustic panels. I feel like with their with the new Gobo wall system, man, I can really shape the tone of my room, which is very, very important in Atmos when you start getting into capturing a lot of the space as well, especially with the ambisonic mic and everything. I really felt like I had a lot more control when I got those for this project than I ever have. And so that was a big thing as well for kind of pulling this all in full circle and getting to a point where I feel like I can produce Atmos music the way I want to and have control over things with the mic and how the space sounds and everything. So those GIK panels that I got for this, also did a review on those. You can see that video, but that Gobo wall really helped pull everything together and really help shape things in a cool way. So I'm excited to use those more. John Scanlon at Dolby, I used to work with him at a recording school a long time ago. He was my boss, but John Scanlon's working at Dolby now. He's answered a lot of my stupid questions, so thank you, John. Always appreciated. I'm still learning here, so it's nice to have smart people and get answers straight from the horse's mouth, so to say. So thank you, John. Man, last thing I'll say, I started this whole process with this video and this song feeling a little bit alone in a lot of ways. I know it might sound lame and cheesy, but I just felt like I would, and I don't mean to sound arrogant when I say this, but I kind of felt like I was doing something that no one else was doing, and it was frustrating because it was hard to get feedback from people, especially finding people that I felt like knew what they were doing and were trying to do it the same way I did. And as I started this and got deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, all of a sudden I found a huge community of people that are doing stuff just like this, that have a huge head start on me and have been doing this for years and are so much better at it than me. And all of a sudden I started finding all these people And I found that they were all very generous and very nerdy like me, and more than willing to talk shop and just nerd out and give advice. And a lot of these people are like top of the game people that usually shouldn't, you know, usually won't have time to deal with some weird dude in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas playing with Ambisonic mics. So tons of people that I met through this process, showing like clips of this video and just getting feedback. All of a sudden I found that, you know, I was not as alone as I thought I was when I started this out. And there are so many people doing stuff just like this. So that was really cool. I think Atmos is in a place where it's going to start to grow in some really cool creative ways. The biggest person I want to point out to everyone is a guy named Justin Gray. He's amazing. If you thought this was cool and you nerded out over this video series, Google Justin Gray and check out his Immersed album, because that's out now. Justin has done this whole album with amazing musicians that was made specifically for Atmos. He uses a bunch of immersive mic array techniques and all this other stuff. And Justin, I think he's one of the best at this. He's been very generous and open and answered a lot of my dumb questions and just been a really cool dude. So it's been cool getting to know him and listening to his music. Check out his Immersed album. He did a whole video with it. He might be doing some showings in your area, especially if you're in Canada. But man, he's done a whole video series too that he's still spitting them out, where he goes over things song for song. He breaks down recording techniques and stuff. He's done what I've done times 1,000. Like, holy crap. Again, if you thought this was cool, check out Justin Gray and his Immersed album. Justin, you're freaking amazing, man. And yeah, it's guys like him where I figured out towards the end of this process, I was like, man, I am not alone in this. There's a ton of people that are so far ahead of me that I can start, you know, deep diving into their catalog of stuff they've done and have a base of things where I can start listening to things that I can trust and, you know, actually start learning and not feel like I'm alone in this and having to figure out stuff all on my own. I have this network of people now that I can reach out to and, you know, start learning and figuring this out on a higher level. So yes, we're done. I'm going to stop talking. Thank you so much for watching. I need to say, I will have downloadable files for you. If you work in Atmos and you have speakers, I will have a link to where you can download the full ADM file for this song. If you want to hear my mix on your speaker system, I'll just give you the ADM. The video before this walked through the full session files and how I have everything laid out, so you can download the full session files as well. So do not forget about that. That's a big thing. So thank you so much. Enjoy your days. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Now it's just awkward. I'm sorry. Fail train. All right, I'm just going to awkwardly walk away. Yeah, that sounds good.